All right, so in today's warm up, in 1 to 2 sentences, write your response to the following question in chat. Please remember to use correct spelling, grammar, punctuation, and capitalization. What makes a book great? What makes a book great? Since you're authenticated, you're now using your legal first and last name. Be on mute, and you have your video turned on. Please remember this is for attendance and engagement purposes. What makes a video great? If you haven't written down what makes a book great yet, please make sure you do that for your warm-up and engagement credits. Let's go over the weekly agenda. So yesterday was no school due to Labor Day. I hope you had a really great weekend. Today we are going over the Tangerine novel and introduction. On Wednesday, we will be talking about our Tangerine journal. On Thursday, we'll talk about, again, the Tangerine novel and read. And on Friday, we will introduce your narrative elements character vocabulary. This week, we'll also discuss independent work time and the plot test answers. But these are the main things that we're doing this week. So today's daily agenda is the attendance and the warm-up, our weekly review, which we just did, and our Tangerine Introduction review and Read Tangerine. If you didn't take your narrative elements and plot vocabulary assessment, please join our Zoom link today at 1:53 p.m. That's that independent work time you now have built into your schedule. Most of you have taken this. And your objective is to read and comprehend the novel Tangerine today. And our overarching objective is to analyze the character's choices and the consequences of those choices. We'll be looking at that throughout the time that we read the novel. Our new schedule reminder and Zoom authentication. You got into the class, so you were authenticated, but please remember any time that you aren't able to go into class or you see an error message, go to zoom.us, log in through the Gmail or Google with your RCSD Kids email account. We know that you've clicked on authenticate in that email, but you might just get kicked out sometimes of Zoom, and so you need to log in that way. So make sure you understand that our class is 32 minutes long, and this is our schedule for all week, including on Monday. Yes, you will have e-period now on Monday, and your lunch is 60 minutes long. We talked a little bit about independent work time last week, and we'll talk about it more today towards the end of the period. You have a Google form that you did on Friday, that Tangerine Introduction review. Just as a reminder, it's still going to say in progress because I haven't finished grading them, but don't worry, I have that you've completed it, and I'll input grades very soon. It looks like this. So when you filled this out and I asked you, have you ever read the novel Tangerine? Most of you said no. 88.9% of you said no. Some of you have read part of it and some of you aren't sure. So you'll find out. And when I said, what do you think Tangerine explores the idea of forgetting life events or only having a fuzzy memory of something? When or why might a person make a choice to forget something? Some of you said you didn't know. But a lot of you said that it had to do with a painful or negative memory in your past. Sometimes it's an embarrassing memory or a part of your childhood that someone might not want to remember. And you're at the age where you've experienced both positive and negative life experiences. And so I think some of us can relate to this when we might make a choice to forget something. What's something that you learned from the sinkhole video? Some of you learned that there are thousands of sinkholes in Florida. They can be anywhere the water eats at that limestone. It even was around during the Ice Age. Something that we don't really think about here in California. They're pretty common though. And they can be very dangerous. If you did not get a chance to watch that sinkhole video, please make sure you do that on your own time. What did you learn about the muck fires in that website? That muck fires burn underground, and again, they can be very dangerous. They can literally combust at almost any time. And unlike the fires that we have in California, some of them are not due to negligence, right, with a muck fire, because they can't control when they pop up. And some of them take a very, very long time to extinguish. And if you weren't able to access that website, just make sure you're copying and pasting correctly. You can also Google muck fires for some more responses as well. Based on your work today, ignore that bell. Your class isn't over. You'll hear another one too in a couple of minutes. Based on your work today, predict what do you think this book will be about? Some of you mentioned it about muck fires or sinkholes. Some of you took a look at the picture on the cover. Not really about muck fires or sinkholes, but I was kind of wondering, what is your idea about what this book's going to be about based on those articles about the natural disasters or phenomenons that happen? Because these are two real things that are in this fictional book. And some of you chose to really go towards a theme, like about how life can be tough. Really interesting for me to read those responses. A lot of you weren't doing too much this Labor Day weekend, hanging out your house. Some of you had baseball or soccer practice. Some of you were going to the beach or to Tahoe. But a lot of you were just hanging out with family or the few friends that you surround yourself with during this unusual time. But it was really nice to get to see a little bit more about you as well on this form. And then the last part I asked you to complete is, now that you're done with this Tangerine Introduction, to check your grades. If you have all C's, which is most of you, that means all of your work is done and complete. Remember, you still have 2 in-progress assignments. Those are the 2 Google Forms that I'm grading. One is your plot test. One is the introduction. You turn them in. You don't need to do anything else with them. But I just wanted to let you know that those 2 are going to still stay in progress until I'm done grading them. Some of you have S's because you didn't finish work. Please remember that you can still do that. You can either press retake assessment, which just means redo your assignment or finish it, or you can pull it up in your Google Drive because it is still there and share it with me via email. If you have an R, it's because you never started that assignment. So if you see that in there, go ahead, complete it by pressing retake assessment, or look for it in your Google Drive and share it with me that way. But you can still get a C for that missing late work. And if you did notice any errors, please email me. I do make mistakes. I put in at least 150 to a couple thousand grades a day. So it is important that you know that I will make a mistake at some point this year. And if you see that, just email me. Let me know. We will fix it. All right. If you haven't done that introduction form, please make sure to do that. And I want to go over your book. So go ahead and take out your book. Today we're going to be examining, how do authors use narrative elements to create a story, the concept of choice and how the choices you make now shape your future self, and how decisions can have far-reaching consequences that determine your character, values, and contribution to society. Please remember that you should have a Tangerine book. If you don't have your Tangerine book, you can contact the front office and the librarian, and they will arrange a pickup day for you. We also already looked at our Springboard book, where we talked about Unit 1, which was exploring the concept of choice, and Unit 3, which talked about choices and consequences. Today, and like any other day that we're reading, we have reading expectations. So each day you should have your book out. You should follow along on the correct page, meaning it is open to that correct page. You are quiet and you stay seated and keep your camera on. If for some reason that day you can't find your book, it is on a PDF online if you search Tangerine PDF. And if you ever want to listen to it on an audio version, you can search Tangerine novel on YouTube and you'll find different teachers reading it there as well. Today, during your independent work time, you have nothing to complete, no homework or extra work to finish. So we'll go over these reading expectations each day, but I just want you to know what they are when I'm reading or when we're listening to the audiobook. Some things to notice is that this book starts with a prologue and a foreword. It starts with a prologue and a foreword. There are 3 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3. And instead of chapters, there are dates. So it might say something like Monday, October 2nd. But there might also be another date there that says Monday, October 2nd, later. So sometimes there are 2 parts to one date, such as earlier and later. This story is told in first-person narrator by Paul, and this is not a true story. It's fiction, but there are still some true elements to it, like sinkholes and muck fires. But it is not a true story. Before we start with the prologue and the foreword, I want to make sure you know what an eclipse is. An eclipse is an astronomical event that occurs when an astronomical object is temporarily obscured, either by passing into the shadow of another body or by having another body pass between it and the viewer. So there can be a lunar eclipse like you see with the darker picture, and a solar eclipse like you see with the picture with more of the colors. And then I've shown you a picture of what Coke bottle glasses might look like. They're just thicker glasses. So go ahead and open your book to the prologue today. This is a flashback. And a flashback is a sudden and vivid memory of an event in the past. It's also an interruption in the sequence of events in the plot of a story to relate events that occurred in the past. So I want you to think about during this flashback, why do you think the author chose to write this part before the book starts? And what's important about this part? And it's literally the very first page you turn to. It's called Out of Focus. Before you even see page 1. So out of focus. I was standing at the back of a line of kids, waiting to board the bus for one of my first days at kindergarten. I would be accompanied by no one except Eric, my 5th grade brother. But Eric did not accompany me for long. He was standing at the front of the school bus line with his 5th grade friends when one of them turned, made a gesture, and called to me, "Hey, Eclipse boy, how many fingers am I holding up?" I didn't realize at first that the boy was talking to me, and I had no idea what he meant. Eric and his friends laughed about the joke, and then the bus doors opened and we all filed in. I can't put all the details in order now, but it became clear to me later that, for some reason, the big kids on the school bus were calling me Eclipse Boy. The fact is, we did have an eclipse that summer, around 3 weeks before school started. Based on that, Eric was telling his friends this story. The reason for the Coke bottle glasses on my eyes was that I had stared at the sun, unprotected, during that eclipse. The story puzzled me then, and it puzzles me now. I do not remember doing any such thing. And yet when I search through our family photos, I can see that I never wore glasses of any kind before that summer. So I want you to think about Why do you think the author chose to write this part before the book starts? And what is important about this part? And then I want you to flip the page. You're going to see there's a little part about notes, Tangerine, the dedication, the novel title, and then the foreword. The foreword actually starts on page 1. You can tell because the next page says page 2. But it starts before you can see part 1. So that's why it's called the foreword, before. It also contains an important flashback. And I also want you to think about, why did the author choose to write this part before the book starts? And what's important about this part? Why do you think the author chooses to write this part before the book starts? And what's important about this part? All right. So we're there on page 1, starting with, the house looks strange. It was completely empty now, and the door was flung wide open like something wild had just escaped from it, like it was the empty 2-story tomb of some runaway zombie. Mom called out to me, "Take the bag, Paul. I want to have one last look around." I said, "I just did. I didn't see anything." "Well, maybe you didn't look everywhere. I'll just be a minute." I looked everywhere. "Wait for me out by the car, please. We can't have the new owners thinking we left a mess behind." I picked up the garbage bag and hauled it out to the curb. We'd already packed up our sleeping bags, suitcases, and 2 folding chairs, all neatly wedged into the back of Mom's Volvo wagon. Now only this 10-gallon self-tying, lemon-scented garbage bag remained, and we planned to toss it into the dumpster behind the 7-Eleven. But first, Mom had to make sure that I didn't overlook anything. She was worried that the people who bought our house, people who we've never met, would find a McDonald's swizzle stick and think less of us. Once we dump this garbage bag, that will be it. That will be the last evidence that the Fisher family ever lived in Houston. Dad and my brother Eric are already gone. They've been living in Florida for a week now, with the sleeping bags, suitcases, and chairs that they stuffed into Dad's Range Rover. The rest of our furniture left yesterday, professionally packed by 2 guys who came to really hate Mom. By now, it should be over halfway to our new address, a place called Lake Windsor Downs in Tangerine County, Florida. I set the garbage bag down and leaned against the station wagon, staring east, directly into the rising sun. I'm not supposed to do that because my glasses are so thick. My brother Eric once told me that if I ever look directly into the sun with these glasses, my eyeballs will burst into flame like dry leaves under a magnifying glass. I don't believe that. But I turned back around anyway, and I looked west down our street at the receding line of black mailboxes. Something about them fascinated me. I leaned my chin against the top of the station wagon and continued to stare. An old familiar feeling came over me, like I had forgotten something. What was it? What did I need to remember? Somewhere behind me, a car engine started up and a scene came back to me. I remembered a black metal mailbox on a black metal pole. I was riding my bike home at dinner time, heading east down this street with the sun setting behind me. I heard a loud roar like an animal's, like a predator, snarling. I swiveled my head around, still pedaling, and looked back. All I could see was the red sun, huge now, setting right over the middle of the street. I couldn't see anything else, but I could hear the roar, even louder now, and I recognized it. The roar of an engine revved up to full throttle. And I just want to point out that, again, this is a flashback in this moment. I tilted up my sports goggles to unfog them. Then I turned back and saw it, a black car. Just an outline at first, then clear and detailed. It came right out of the sun. I saw a man hanging out of the passenger window, hanging way out. He had something pulled over his face, some kind of ski mask, and he was holding a long metal baseball bat in both hands. like a murder weapon. Then the gears ground. The tires squealed and the car leapt forward at an impossible speed. I swiveled back terrified and pedaled as hard as I could. I heard the roar of the car closing in on me, louder and louder like it had smelled its prey. I shot a glance into my bike mirror, and there it was, half a block behind me, then 10 yards, then 1 yard. The man in the ski mask leaned farther out the window. He pulled the bat back and up. Then he brought it forward in a mighty swing, right at my head. I dove to the right, landing on my face in the grass, just as a baseball bat smashed into the mailbox, exploding it right off its pole. Voices inside the car screamed, animal fury screams, as the crushed black metal scattered across the street. I scrambled back up. I left my bike there, its wheels spinning, and ran for home. I ran in absolute terror, listening for the sound of the car squealing back around to come after me again. I burst through the front door, crying hysterically. My goggles were twisted back around my head. I spun around and around looking for Mom. Then Mom and Dad were both in front of me, holding on to my shoulders, trying to calm me down, trying to understand the word that I was saying over and over. It was Eric. I was saying Eric. Dad finally understood. He looked right into my eyes and asked, "What do you mean by Eric? Eric what, Paul?" I stammered out, "Eric, he tried to kill me." Mom and Dad let go of my shoulders and stepped back. They looked at each other puzzled. Then Dad raised his arm up and pointed to the right, into the dining room. There was Eric. He was sitting at the dining room table. He was doing his homework. Dad eyeballed me for a few seconds. Then he went out front to look for my bike. Eric called over, "There he goes, blaming me again." Mom took me into the kitchen and got me a glass of water. She ran her finger under the strap of my goggles and slipped them off. Then she said, "Honey, you know how it is with your eyesight. You know you can't see very well." And that was that. But I can see. I can see everything. I can see things that Mom and Dad can't or won't. Mom's voice broke into my remembrance. "Paul?" My chin was still pressed against the car. She was standing next to me. "Paul, are you with us?" I leaned back as she beeped the auto alarm and opened the tailgate. "You're remembering all the good times you had here, aren't you?" I shook my head to clear it. I reached to pick up the garbage bag. My arms felt weak. I muttered, I was remembering something that happened. She held up a white cigarette butt and said, "You don't know anything about this, do you?" "No." "I found it in the garage, behind the water heater." I opened up the garbage bag enough for her to slip it inside. I said, "Good work, Mom." She walked quickly back up to the house, laid her keys inside the foyer, and pulled the door firmly closed. And that was that. The keys were locked in. The zombie was locked out. And we were on our way. Part 1 we'll read later. But again, I want you to think about, why do you think the author chose to write this part before the book starts? What's important about this part? And I also want you to think about some questions we're going to review in more depth tomorrow. Why is the book called Tangerine? You may not have gotten that answer just yet, but you might have a good idea. What happened with the car situation, the mailboxes, the baseball bat? What's with him blaming his brother? His brother obviously felt like he does it a lot. But he says he can see. He can see what his parents won't. What do you think he means by that? And why do you think that author included the part about the cigarette? It's strange. The author chose to put it there purposefully. I can tell you, if my dad found a cigarette behind the water heater and he even considered the fact that it was mine, I'd be in deep trouble, and it wouldn't have been a question like Mom asked. Do you know anything about this cigarette? So why do you think the author included that part? Because it was purposeful. And then tomorrow we'll discuss how to complete our Tangerine journals, what you should do during independent work time, and we'll continue to read Tangerine together. Today you have no independent work time assignments. We're using the time from 1:53 to 3:14 to make up our plot tests from last week. If you did complete your plot test, you don't have specific work from me to complete today. And you can always read another book, complete iReady lessons, make up missing work, or review or study, or even organize your space. Has it gotten messy this last month? So if you're one of the people that missed your plot test, please come see me clicking our regular Zoom link at 1:53 p.m. today. You can find that in the Otis class board. You still have to be authenticated, and we'll take that test together.